Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. And yeah, so what's up? Anyway guys, I've actually been gone for so long. I've really been gone for so long. That one I can't refuse. I have no explanation. And as we're going to the end of the year, I want you come here. I want to be consistent. And I know you guys, those people who have been subscribed here for a long time know that this is my promise every time I make a video. I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to do it. I'm going to go through it. But this time I'm being for real. This time it's a new year. It's a new year, baby. New year, new me. Period. But without further ado, let's actually get into this video today. The first thing I want to put up is a few disclaimers. The first disclaimer I want to make is there's a dog, as I've always said. There's a dog that's always barking outside my house, and I don't know why these guys can't just tame this their dog. But you know what? Shame, I like dogs, so you know what, I'm gonna let it slide. Furthermore, anything that I say in today's video is just from sources that I have found online. I will be linking every single source that I have used in this video down below in the description box for anyone who wants to verify and check. Furthermore, I mean no disrespect to anybody that I talk about in this video, not the family and not the victims of the case, and I truly and sincerely hope that any way that I conduct myself in this video will not be taken or construed to mean that I am trying to disrespect anybody that I talk about in this video. Right, without further ado, let's get right into this video. So for today's case, we're actually going to be talking about a case that you guys have really requested, and that is the case of Mr. Lawrence Warunge. Now, I am going to call him Warunge because that's how I read the name. If you feel like you don't like that, I don't know how to help you. I heard on the news they were calling him Warunge, Warunge, so I'm just going to go with Warunge. Yeah, because I know people called Warungo, so I know this one can be Warunge. You get what I mean? Anyway, that's all. But anyway, let's get right into this video. So I am going to be doing my makeup as I usually do, as I discussed. My mirror would... I will be looking over here because I'd like to see what I'm doing, and this is where my mirror is. But don't forget, I will still be talking to you guys. I've not forgotten. We're having a little liaison, a little rendezvous. A little coup d'état. Coup d'état means what? Revolution. Anyway, you guys, I take way too long to get into these videos. So let's start. So the events of this case actually take place in 2021, according to what I saw online. Now, this case is a very infamous case in Kenya, and it honestly took the entire country by storm because it is a case of family murder. Now, this is where I would like to actually take some time to put in an issue in some trigger warnings. If you are triggered by people with family problems or, family issues and basically that type of thing, you can just go on ahead and click out of this video now. I don't want to put you in any uncomfortable situation. Anyway, as I said, this case was actually very infamous in Kenya. It is still very infamous in the country. And I never even knew about this case before you guys told me. Anyway, let's hop right into who we're going to be talking about today. Now, the main person we're going to be talking about today is a Mr. Lawrence Warunge, as I said. And I'm just gonna take some time and get into who Mr. Lawrence Warunge really was. Now, Lawrence was born to his parents, Nicholas Warunge Njoroge, and his wife, Annie Wanjiko. And Lawrence was actually the firstborn to his parents, and he was born into a house that wasn't unstable, financially unstable. Lawrence's father actually worked abroad as a nurse. He worked in America as a nurse, and he became a businessman from the money that he made being a nurse. So they made a lot of good money, and his mother also worked with the government. She worked for the Kiambu County government as well. She worked as a nurse. So Lawrence's parents are bringing in good money. You can tell this also by the fact that Lawrence lived in a very good area. In a very good area. He lived in Kiambu, and on top of living in Kiambu, they had a yard, they had a garden, and they could also afford a shamba boy, a gardener. So Lawrence's family was pretty financially stable. Later in his life, Lawrence would actually get siblings. He would have 2 younger sisters that followed him. And after that, he would have a brother, and his family would actually take in one of their nephews called Maxwell. And they treated him basically as a brother in the family, so he was equivalent to any other member of the family. So let's say Lawrence had 2 sisters and 2 brothers coming after him. Now Lawrence was a very quiet child. He really didn't get into like many fights or squabbles at school. He went to actually pretty good schools. For high school, he actually went to Pioneer High School, which, if you didn't know, is a very, very reputable school in Kenya. You guys that are going to Pioneer, you all are doing it. It's giving prestige. It's giving elite with a capital T. And he was actually a very good student at this school. Nobody had anything bad to say about him. He was very disciplined, very polite, according to all the teachers. He really didn't exhibit any issues. Now, although this is true about Lawrence, according to Lawrence, he actually says that during this time in his life, he was really going through it. He claims that his parents were really, really mean to him, and he even claimed to a point that his mother actually was planning to poison him. Now, this neglect or this dislike toward Lawrence from his parents actually increased when he had younger siblings. Lawrence says that when he got his younger siblings, his parents' distaste towards him actually increased, and they even brought in like the siblings to not like Lawrence. So all of them were like them against Lawrence, and his siblings wouldn't stand up for Lawrence according to what he said, which continuously made Lawrence feel like an outsider in his own family. And he really didn't like it there. He really didn't appreciate the way he was being treated. This is what he said. I will go on to add that there is actually no specific proof that Lawrence and his family had like any beef going on between them. There's no evidence that his parents mistreated him. Neighbors in the place, like neighbors in Kiambu County that live next to him, like everybody just says this isn't true. We never saw anything like this. On top of that, his teachers at school say he was very like well developed. He never showed any signs of a person who was being abused basically back home. Oh, and I forgot to add that Lawrence, on top of thinking that his mother was actually trying to poison him, also referred to his parents as satanic people. That's just a side note. I just wanted to add that in there for anybody who hasn't gotten that. He really didn't like his parents is what I'm trying to conclude. After graduating from Pioneer High School, Lawrence would actually decide to go to Mount Kenya University to study information technology at the university. Now, you guys, honestly, ICT is really the future. Like, wow. I'm just seeing people in ICT getting jobs, and I'm like, wow, these software engineers, software developers, good for you all. Good for you all. Anyway, that's a side note. Lawrence decides to go and complete his degree in ICT at the Mount Kenya University. And at this point, when Lawrence decides to go to university, he actually has to move out because, I think Kiambu, and I'm not sure the distance between Kiambu and Mount Kenya University, and I'm not even sure if they have different campuses, but Lawrence decides that he needs to move out from his home, which you would think is a positive thing because, he says that his parents were horrible, terrible people to him. So moving out for Lawrence would be a great thing. Lawrence moves to the campus, and as he's living on campus, he really gets involved in the social life. Like, Lawrence, although he is still referred to as being a quiet person, he has friends. He's really doing well on campus. Nobody has an issue with him. Nobody is actually looking at him and being like, he's so weird. People said he was really polite. People said he was a great guy. There was nothing really technically that you could pinpoint and be like, Lawrence Warunge has an issue because of X, Y, and Z. No, he was just a quiet guy. Lawrence would actually be so into school and like so into what's going on and so involved to the point where he actually ended up getting a girlfriend, a little baby girl, a little msupa. Now, Lawrence's girlfriend was called Sarah Muthoni, and, they really got along. I mean, I don't think you would date someone if you don't get along with them. From what I could find, there wasn't any instances of abuse or anything from Lawrence or from Sarah, but there was no report of any domestic violence or any kind of ruffian, any behavior going on between Lawrence and his girlfriend Sarah. From what I could tell, the relationship was pretty healthy. And honestly, good for Lawrence. Like, that's what you would hope, like when you go to university, that your life is looking up. Now, because Lawrence was very quiet, he tended to spend a lot of time indoors watching TV shows. And among his favorite TV show was actually one called Killing Eve. And this is where really the problems now begin for Lawrence. Now, what is Killing Eve all about? Now, according to online sources, Killing Eve is actually a British spy thriller show. I've never really watched it. I like listening to like true crime cases, but I don't really like watching like all these like true crime like movies, like thrillers, I'm not into that. I don't like my heart being stifled. So when this guy wants to pass, like, I'm not really into that. I don't like panicking myself for nothing in the morning. But anyway, I've never watched Killing Eve. If you have, please comment down below, rate the show out of 10. I haven't watched it, but anyway, Lawrence really gets into this show Killing Eve, and like I was saying, Killing Eve is a British spy thriller show. And Eve, who is the main girlie in the show, is an agent that's actually been tasked with hunting down a psychopathic assassin. So basically, from what I could gather, Eve was like Batman chasing after the Joker. Like, she was someone going after the bad guys who had wronged, people, and also technically wronged her in their lives. So that's what I could gather from what I read about the show Killing Eve. And Lawrence really looked up to Eve. According to what he said when he watched the show, he just felt so liberated because he was seeing Eve not allowing people to step on her neck. Like, he felt like she was someone who took control of her life and didn't allow bad guys to get away with doing what bad guys do, which is bad things. And Lawrence starts to get some serious encouragement from watching Killing Eve, and some serious encouragement for standing up for himself from watching Killing Eve. And this is where a very, very nasty thought occurs in Mr. Lawrence Warunge's head. As Lawrence is watching Killing Eve and watching Eve basically get justice for, the things in her life that she didn't like, he actually gets the idea that, hey, Eve is able to stand up for herself against bad guys and tell people off and decide what she wants to happen in her life. Why shouldn't I be able to do the same? And this is when he gets the idea from the show Killing Eve that he should actually go and kill off the people in his life that have been making him feel really bad in his life, aka his family. Now, obviously, to do this, Lawrence needed to hatch a plan, right? Lawrence decides he's going to hatch a plan of how he's going to kill his family. Now, the plan he hatched actually wasn't just one. He hatched a plan 3 times. 3 times, you guys. And all 3 times it failed. And it was only on the 4th attempt that the plan actually went successfully. So let me give you the stages of how he approached this. First of all, Lawrence decided that the most important part of his plan was going to get himself ready, was starting to train himself physically, get into fit shape to be able to carry out and conduct the murders against his family. He not only trains his body, but he also trains himself on how to camouflage, how to not be seen. And he was watching a different number of shows, a different type of show, different number of shows to be able to teach himself how to carry out these kind of things, to be able to teach himself how to camouflage, to be able to teach himself how to fight, basically, and get his plan in the works going. Now, Lawrence trains himself, and during this time, he's coming up and hatching a plan. And finally, after the 3 failed plans, he comes up with the 4th plan. Now, Lawrence would ask his girlfriend to buy him a knife. It said in some sources he asked her to buy 3 knives, but then in others it said 1. But I'm just gonna stick with 1 because I didn't see anywhere them saying that they found 3 knives. So they only had the 1. So his plan was he was going to ask his girlfriend to go and buy him a knife so that he can be able to orchestrate the murders with said knife. On top of that, now as his girlfriend would go and buy him the knife, Lawrence planned that when she came back, he was actually going to drug her with bangi. He was going to get her high on weed, very, very high on weed, to the point where she couldn't understand anything and she would just knock out and fall asleep. Why was he planning to do this? He was planning to do this so that his girlfriend doesn't actually get involved or doesn't find out what he's going to do. He was planning to knock her out and have her knocked out for a long period of time, to which he would be able to go commit the murders and come back. He would then tell his girlfriend when he comes back that, oh my God, also me, I've been knocked out from the weed all this time. Meanwhile, he wasn't actually knocked out. His plan was to go and kill his family as his girlfriend was knocked the fuck out. Now, I'm going to tell this plan in real time. and I want you to kind of follow along. So I'm telling you the plan, and I'm telling you how it unfolded on the day. Now his girlfriend according to what I could understand, his girlfriend actually did go and buy the knives, but the issue is she wasn't able to come back on time, so he wasn't able to go and orchestrate the killings the way he wanted to carry it out on the specific day. And which this time delay is going to be very important further on in the case, so please just pay attention and follow through with me. So his girlfriend goes, buys the knives, and after he gets the knives, the plan is now in motion. Even though she's been late and she wasn't able to bring the knives back on time, the plan is now in motion. Now on the 5th of January, he has now gotten the knives, and he decides he's going to this next step of his plan. The next step of his plan was obviously to get his girlfriend drugged. Now he tries to drug his girlfriend, but his girlfriend actually doesn't get drugged. She's a hardcore queen. So at this point, he realizes his girlfriend is not going to get drunk, so he just decides altogether to continue with his plan and leave the girl there. Like, whatever happens, happens at this point. He decides to make his way to town. When he reached town, the next part of his plan was that he was actually going to change into a set of clothes that he was supposed to that was supposed to be like his, I don't know, his alias. I don't know what the hell that was supposed to be. But he had actually carried a bag full of clothes, specifically women's clothing, so that he can be able to camouflage himself basically and seem not suspicious, so that nobody would be able to tell it's him. In the bag that he had actually carried, he had a wig, he had a pair of women's clothes, and he had a pair of women's trousers. He changes into the set of clothes, and after this he decides to go into the cathedral to pray. But he actually was scared of going into the church because he felt like if he went into the church, someone would actually search his bags and discover that he is actually a man cosplaying as a woman. And he decided, oh my gosh, you know what? Let me dump this bag somewhere else. So he takes his bag to a nearby supermarket, and he dumps his bag and he leaves the bag in the carrier service. You know how you guys leave your bags? Like when you're entering a supermarket, they tell you leave your bag here. Yeah. So he decides to leave his bag there and enters the church to make his prayers. Now, after he finishes praying, he actually decides to leave the supermarket. He actually decides to leave his bag in the supermarket. So he leaves with the supermarket tag, and he leaves the bag with his old pair of clothes behind. Now, here we have Lawrence dressed up in an outfit so people don't know it's him. And he's now making his way to Kiambu, which is where his family home is. First, Lawrence would actually go to Limuru before going to Kiambu. Then he would get transport from Limuru to Kiambu. Lawrence would get to Kiambu, and he would actually walk right up to his family gate. This is the part where I'm so uncertain of, because he walked up to his family gate, and the gate man and the gardener who was hired there actually opened the door for him and knew who he was. But from what I could understand, according to what the sources were saying, it was that Lawrence was dressed as a woman. So I don't understand, or maybe that's something he did. I don't know, maybe he's done it before, so or maybe that's the guy at the door didn't really care like that. Maybe he just wasn't pressed like that. Anyway, so the man who opened the gate for him and their gardener, his name was James Kinyanjui. When James opened the gate for him, obviously they had a little chat. They said, hey, he was like, hey, how are you? How have you been? And James obviously asked him hey, why are you home? Nobody's expecting you home. Why are you here? And, he was just yeah, I'm just here to say hi. I'm just here visiting, etc., etc. Now, as Lawrence and James are having this chat, they're obviously walking towards the house at this point. As they are walking, James is in front of Lawrence, and Lawrence asks James for a metal bar. James asks Lawrence, why do you need a metal bar? What? That's a very random request. And this is at which point Lawrence would just tell him, I just need it. And James seems like a very chill guy. Because if you ask me for a metal bar, I'll kind of look at you sideways. I'll be like, why do you need that? Why do you need that? Anyway, James just lets it all go, and he walks with Lawrence, and he leaves Lawrence and goes and gets the metal bar. When he comes back, he gives the metal bar to Lawrence, and at this point, James then turns his back away from Lawrence, as though he's walking away from Lawrence. And it's at this point Lawrence actually swung the metal bar and hit James over the back of the head with said metal bar. As he's hitting James at the back of his head, according to Lawrence, because his intention was to kill James, he decides to now slit James's throat. Lawrence says his decision to slit James's throat was because James apparently, according to Lawrence, refused to die. So he slits Lawrence's throat, and effectively this sadly leads to the death of James Kinyanjui. James is now dead, and Lawrence now decides to make his way towards the house. Now, as he's walking towards the house, for some reason, Lawrence decides to chill for some time. Like, he looks at the situation. I think it was like a cool down period to like understand exactly what he had just done and go through the motions of all of that. He decides to chill, he decides to cool down, and during this time he starts scouting the perimeter of his house. He goes and has a look at the electric fence, has a look at that, sees what's going on there, sees whether someone can be able to enter or escape through there. According to Lawrence, he actually got electrocuted by the electric fence in the house, but this didn't really deter him from his mission. Lawrence would stay out for some time until he saw his father being dropped off home by a taxi. Now, it is unclear whether Lawrence actually knew that his father was outside. Now, it is unclear whether Lawrence actually knew that his father was outside of the house during this time, but Lawrence would decide to make his move when he finally saw his father being dropped home by the taxi. Lawrence now obviously decides this is the moment. He sees his father dropped off by the taxi. His father was carrying a few things. He had bought He had bought a few alcohol bottles for the night for him to be able to just kick back and relax. And he came into the house. And as soon as he came into the house, Lawrence decided to make his move, and the first thing he decided to do was go around the house and turn off the power of the house. So now everything is dark, and by this point it's 8 p.m. Now the lights are off, and obviously everybody can't see. And this is at which point Lawrence decides he's going to give himself the advantage of sight and actually lights a green paper bag on fire. And he does this right outside the kitchen. Now, during this time that he's doing this, his mom is actually in the kitchen. She was getting, I think, food ready or something, because it is 8 o'clock at night. I think she was doing something in the kitchen. She comes to the back of the house. She comes to the back door to have a look at what is that going on. What's going on right now, as the lights are obviously off in the house. Now, as soon as she sets eyes on Lawrence, it becomes very apparent to her that Lawrence wasn't there to be like a good guy or to be happy with anyone. Lawrence had a weapon in his hands, and as soon as she saw this, it obviously took her some time, but then she turns around and tries to run away. Now, as she's trying to run away, Lawrence uses the metal bar that he had gotten from James and that he had hit James with to hit his own mother on the back of the head as she's trying to get away from Lawrence. Lawrence hits her on the back of the head, and obviously someone in the house would be able to hear this commotion. His brother Christian, his youngest brother Christian, decides to come up into the kitchen and see what the hell's going on here. And it's at this point Christian meets Lawrence towering over his mother that he had just hit with a metal bar. Christian realizes what's going on, and Christian decides to run back into the house, which is a normal reaction considering the fact that Christian is a young kid. Christian was able to, get away from his brother, and he made it up to the bedroom. Now, during all of this, Lawrence's father is upstairs. He's actually having some of the beers that he brought, and he's just relaxing and chilling, and he's relaxing. He's living his life. He's gotten home from a long day of work. What else are you supposed to do if not relax, you guys? So his father hears all of this commotion, and it's at this point he decides to stand up and come and have a look at exactly what's going on. The lights are off. He's hearing all these people downstairs shouting. What the hell is going on? He decides to come down and have a look. And as he's coming down to come and see what's going on, it's at this point that he meets his own son, Lawrence, with a metal bar in his hand. His father is obviously confused for some time, but then he quickly realizes that, oh my gosh, it's him who's doing all of this. So his father turns around and tries to run away and get away from Lawrence. As he's doing this, Lawrence decides to follow him and run after his father. And as he's running after his father actually decides to jump from the balcony in an attempt to save his life and run away from his son. He jumps from the balcony, and he actually got really injured, but he was actually able to stand. Like, he was still able to run, and he was still able to go to continue. Now, as he's trying to get himself up to be able to continue running, to be able to get away from his son Lawrence, Lawrence manages to get downstairs in time, and he actually stabs his father. Now, on top of stabbing him several times, he decides to slit his father's throat on top of all the stabbings. After he finishes this feat, Lawrence decides to go inside and finish the job with his two younger brothers. Now, Lawrence has stabbed his father, he slit his throat, and he thinks this is it. But by God's grace, his father actually isn't dead. His father actually survived this horrific attack from his own son, and he gets up and decides to try and make a run for it towards the gate. However, sadly, as Lawrence's father was opening the gate, Lawrence would actually hear his father trying to get to the gate and trying to open the gate, and Lawrence would effectively come back down to finish the job on his own father. Lawrence actually would stab his father about 35 to 38 times, depending on the article that you read, because different articles said the autopsy said different things. But what is for certain is he did stab his father in a very gruesome way. Second attack, and he would sadly pass on, leaving Lawrence alone with his two younger brothers, Maxwell and Christian. He first started off with his younger brother, Maxwell, who technically was his nephew, but they treated him as a brother. He started off with his younger brother, Maxwell. Now, Maxwell at this time was in grade 7, and he was actually about 13 years old. After finishing off with Maxwell, he then moved on to his brother, Christian. Christian was actually hiding under the bed, and he actually begged for his life when his brother tore him out from under the bed so that he could be able to kill his own little brother. Christian was on his hands and knees begging Lawrence not to do this and begging him to have compassion, but Lawrence did not care. Lawrence would then continue to stab him several times and slit his own little brother's throat. Now, obviously, you guys are wondering, because I had told you, if you're paying attention in the beginning, Lawrence had 2 sisters and 2 brothers. You're obviously wondering, well, Paige, where are the 2 sisters? Now, the 2 sisters actually weren't in the house during this attack, by the grace of God. Now, why, you wonder, they weren't in the house? Now, the 2 sisters actually had gone back to boarding school. Remember when I told you that Lawrence had asked his girlfriend to buy a knife for him and that she had delayed to buy the knife? Yes. Now, her delay actually gave the sisters the time to be able to go back to their respective boarding schools the day before this attack happened. So because Lawrence's girlfriend was late to bring the murder weapon, Lawrence wasn't able to find every single family member in the house, and his sisters had actually made their way to school the day before Lawrence came to finish off his whole family. So the 2 sisters actually survived. And so because they weren't home, this marked the end of the murder spree Lawrence had decided to go on the sad day that is the 5th of January 2021. So Lawrence is now finished. He's exhausted from the murders. Lawrence would decide to go into the kitchen and eat the food that his mother was actually making. On top of eating the food that his mother was making, Lawrence then took a shower. Actually, he took a shower, went to the kitchen, ate the food his mother was in the midst of preparing when he murdered her. And then after that, he put on a television. And as he was eating, he put on a TV program. And when he was done, he then decided to take himself to his father's bed and take a nap. Apparently, a man who was actually working there earlier that day, named Steve Njehu, had actually come back to the site to have a look at, to go and talk to James Kinyanjui, the caretaker of the grounds. He says he came to the house late in the evening, and when he came to the house, he had actually noticed that the lights in the house were on, and upon approaching the house and going inside, he noticed like blood stains on the curtains. So according to David Jehu, he only found the body of David Kinyanjui. Now, when he found this body, it was about like 8 p.m., 9 p.m. ish at night. So he saw the body, called the police. The police would pick up the body of David Kinyanjui, but they didn't actually take time to contact anybody within the Warunge household. Like, they didn't go and knock on the gate and be like, hey, you know, someone in your servants' quarters is dead. They didn't see the point to saying that. They didn't see the point to doing that. And so basically, they took the body of David Kinyanjui and left every other person inside the house. So it was an entire other day before they could find the bodies of the other family members. Now, mind you, during the time that Now, mind you, if they had actually gone into the house to have a look at, what's going on, do you guys know David Kinanji has died? They would have not only found the bodies of the rest of the family, but they would have also caught Lawrence Warunge in the house because he didn't leave until the very next day. So the next day arrives, and at 4 a.m., Lawrence decides to leave. Now, Lawrence says that he actually got out of the house and he managed to hitchhike his way on one of the delivery vans. As he hitchhikes, he's actually driven to Naivasha by the delivery van. And when he gets to Naivasha, he decides to do something very, very interesting. Lawrence then makes his way to Maimahiu, which was actually the rural area of his girlfriend. And this is where he decides to dispose of the murder weapons. Now, he burnt some of his clothes and the mobile phones belonging to his parents, which he had actually collected from the house, and any other remaining evidence that he had, he threw away in a pip latrine at Maimahiu. He then decided after this to make his way to Lower Kabete, and by this point, this is on January 9th, because all this happened on January 5th. Right? And during this time that he's making all this escape, it's through a various number of days. And by the time that he decides to make his way to Lower Kabete, it is on the 9th of January. Now, when he gets to Lower Kabete, for some reason, he decides to put his phone on. And it's at this point that detectives were able to locate his phone. When the police locate him, they obviously make their way over to arrest him because what the hell? They were able to find his entire family murdered. The two people who were unaccounted for, which were his sisters, were found in school, but Lawrence, of all people, couldn't be located whatsoever. Now, this was obviously suspicious, which led the police to go over, arrest him for his testimony. When the police go to arrest him, they actually had to smoke Lawrence out of his hiding spot, which even incriminated him more because why are you hiding? Why are you hiding? If you're not guilty, why are you hiding? Your sisters were not hiding. They were learning. Why are you hiding? You can't explain. Anyway, Lawrence is then smoked out of his hiding spot, and it's at this point when he's smoked out of his hiding spot, he is taken into custody by police, from what I could understand. Now, when he's taken into custody, Lawrence really just says everything. As Lawrence is taken in by police, the police obviously question him, and he says he did it, yes, but he did it all by himself. He's actually quite cooperative, except the fact that he's sticking to the story that he murdered his entire family all by himself. And this is where the police didn't believe him. The police were convinced that Lawrence couldn't have possibly managed to do all of this by himself. First of all, no offense to him, and no body shaming or anything. Lawrence was a skinny guy. The fact that he would be able to overpower his father, his mother, and two brothers was seeming very unlikely, not only to the police, but also to the general public in Kenya. A lot of the comments that even I saw, people were not believing that Lawrence, such a skinny, scrawny boy, was able to overpower his father, his mother, and his two younger brothers. But please keep in mind that Lawrence also had the element of surprise. His family was not expecting him to come in, and on top of that, it's very difficult to also fight someone who you're not expecting to kill you. Anyway, so Lawrence is arrested. He tells the story to the police. The police don't believe him, and they decide to then arrest his girlfriend, Sarah Muthoni, who is the woman who had gone out and gotten Lawrence basically the equipment he would have needed to commit this crime. And she soon enough was cleared, and it was soon made very clear that Sarah Muthoni actually didn't have anything to do with it. She genuinely didn't know that her boyfriend was going to be up to anything. So what they decided to do instead was they decided to keep Sarah Muthoni as a witness so she can be able to testify against Lawrence. So basically, from what I was understanding, she was going to be the person who was going to lock the case on Lawrence. They were going to have her testify against him. Testify on what? I'm not sure. I haven't seen what it was because I don't think Kenya, they usually air out the court proceedings. They don't usually put them on YouTube. I haven't seen that yet. Anyway, and before you guys say I'm lying, I just said I haven't seen it. I didn't say that they never do. And Lawrence is still holding firm to the fact that it was only him involved, there was no one else. The general public still doesn't believe it, but we're going with the story anyway. Now, at this point, his family obviously needs to be buried. And I was unclear if it is at this point that they officially arrested Lawrence, or I don't know, because of the story of the burial. Now, obviously, his family needed to be buried after everything that had happened, and Lawrence was allowed to attend the burial. That's the first part that makes me think, was he really then arrested on the day that they found him on the 9th of January? Lawrence was allowed to go to the burial, and on top of being allowed to go to the burial, Lawrence carried pepper so that he can be able to crush it in his mouth and pretend to be crying, because he was actually very calm. Like, his little sisters were there, they came from school for the burial, they were there, they were crying, they were sad, but according to what sources said, Lawrence was very calm. He had no problem. He was okay. He looked at all of this, he looked very normal. It was as if nothing had just happened to his entire family. Now, two things make me question when Lawrence was actually arrested. The first is that he was actually the first one is that he was actually at the burial, and the second one is the fact that Lawrence was able to carry pepper to crush in his mouth. Which prison would have given him pepper to be able to crush it in his mouth? That's also something I'm also wondering. Like, if he was arrested, he wouldn't have had access to that, but that's a side note. I think that maybe I don't know. But that's just a side note. So it's very unclear exactly the date of which Lawrence was officially in police custody. Anyway, Lawrence is now in police custody, fast forward, and they are now deciding to prosecute and take him to trial. First of all, they decided to have a look at whether he was mentally fit to stand trial. Now, upon the first test that Lawrence took, the first psychiatric evaluation that Lawrence took for whether he was fit to stand trial, it was actually deemed that he was not fit to stand trial, and this basically meant that he couldn't be tried. He was not mentally stable enough to be able to go through a trial and to be able to understand exactly what was going on. So they obviously had to wait. However, Lawrence took a second test on April 13th, 2021. And when he took his second test, it was actually confirmed that he was basically mentally fit to stand trial. Now, the funny thing is, he was deemed mentally fit to stand trial. And on top of this, he had actually given like a full-fledged confession. Lawrence Warunge had given not only a confession, but he had also taken police officers and investigators exactly to the places where he had committed the murder. First of all, he reenacted the entire scene of how he committed the murder in his house. Second of all, on top of reenacting for us, at his house, he then continued to go on to show investigators where he disposed of evidence, how he disposed of evidence. There's even videos of him in a hazmat suit, basically taking investigators to where he threw and burnt the things out in Mai Mahiu. They had to dig out the evidence from the pit latrine, and basically, Lawrence was very much so cooperative. So the fact that he was now deemed to stand trial, it was just like, why are we even trying somebody, guys, that has already clearly told us plenty of times that he is guilty. He's guilty. He's said it multiple times. He's told us he's guilty. We are just the one refusing to listen. So anyway, Lawrence is deemed mentally fit to stand trial, but he decides to take a very interesting twist. Although Lawrence is deemed mentally fit to stand trial, Lawrence decides to plead not guilty to all the counts of murder. That is for his mother, his father, and his two brothers. And on top of that, James Kinyanjui. Lawrence decides to plead not guilty to all the counts of murder, which is a very interesting position to take. Now, I will explain this from like a legal standpoint, why somebody would decide to confess everything, but then on top of confessing everything, would then plead not guilty after being told they are actually fit to stand trial. Being mentally fit to stand trial means that you understood everything that you were doing and you understand everything that's going on. So why, let me explain, would somebody choose from a legal standpoint to say they are not guilty even after giving a confession? Now, I don't know if this is what he did, but I am explaining the legal rationale usually behind these kind of not guilties. The reason he would decide to do this is because he could decide to plead not guilty on account of insanity. Now, when you are insane or when you're deemed insane, it's usually taken as though you can't obviously be guilty because you didn't have your full wits about you when you were committing this crime. So we can't really say that you are guilty. Now, this is very interesting because Lawrence is claiming not guilty. I'm not saying that he's claiming not guilty by virtue of obviously being mentally unfit and everything. But if, let's say, he is saying he's not guilty because he is pleading insanity, this is highly challenged by the fact that he has already been told that he is mentally fit to stand trial. Now, the conversation would obviously be around and would be, was his mental state diminished so far during the time that he committed this crime to plead, for him to be able to plead that he didn't have control of his mentals, like it was a complete blackout. The blackout one is another defense, but basically he would have to prove that he was not mentally himself when he was committing these crimes, which is a bit odd because it's like you have given such a clear and precise account of everything you've done. On top of that, you've just been cleared to be mentally stable and mentally fit to stand this trial. So I would like to have seen exactly how this would have played out had he pleaded insanity or had he pleaded, any form of diminished responsibility accruing from his mental state. But that's a quick side note. If Lawrence was successful in pleading such a thing, he wouldn't go to like prison. He would actually be taken to Mathare because he would be told he's like criminally insane. So if he's criminally insane, then he can't really go to a prison because that wouldn't be justice. It wouldn't be justice. He would have been taken to Mathare. Anyway, long story short, from what I could tell, Lawrence has still not gone to trial. From what I could tell, the latest update was that he was now deemed mentally fit to stand trial. And sadly, this case still remains, I didn't see any articles on whether the case has been concluded or not. I just saw that Lawrence Warunge is now mentally fit to stand trial. Now, I would just like to discuss a bit of the issues that I found with the case. The first thing is the issue of whether he did it by himself. Well, not issues that I found, but basically like conversations around the case. And the first conversation was whether Lawrence Warunge could have been able to do it by himself. People saying like it would have been impossible for him to do it by himself. First of all, the size of his father. Second of all, the fact that James Kenyanjui was like much more physically fit than Lawrence Warunge completely. But like I said, the first thing I would like to say is the fact that Lawrence had the upper hand of one, catching his family off by surprise. Two, he took all of them on one by one. He didn't like take them. Maybe if he took them on as a crew, like all of them together, he maybe would have been able to not take them on. But he wouldn't have been able to take them on. But he took them all on individually, which to me seems like a very clear possibility. And the fact that all of them turned their back towards him to run away really gave Lawrence an upper hand, because the second someone is already behind you, they already have a much more upper hand with regards to what they can and can't do towards you, because you can't defend yourself from the back. That's one. Two, I also have a big issue with how the police handled this case. From my perspective, I did see like some biases, like when the case was like continuing, like when the police were talking about the case. I'll play a clip right now to show you what I mean.
What we are seeing is not normal, because within this family, the Warunge family, there have been an incident which involved Alan Njire Warunge in 2016. He was a victim twice. He was shot. He was on a wheelchair. And there was another one involving Kenneth Mungai Warunge. Kenneth Mungai Warunge was assassinated along with his niece. Thereafter, it was shortly followed by Kinanjui Kamau, who was also killed under unclear circumstances. So this is something which is following the Warunge family.
So basically, this guy is telling us that he's trying to basically play off this entire thing where an entire family has been murdered as, oh, this is something that they do in the Warunge family. Like people just be dying out here. And he's trying to basically tell us like it's not that deep. Like they've been doing this for some time. And I don't know about you guys, but that doesn't sit well with me, because the second you start to tell people like, oh yeah, especially because this is such irrelevant information to what has happened. Like, why are you telling us that people in his family have also died previously like this? They've also died in in unknown circumstances. Like, that doesn't make anything, it doesn't do anything for the case, it doesn't do anything for the family. You're just painting the family in a bad light. I don't understand why we had to have like that specific kind of conversation regarding his family, because that really had nothing to do with anything. And at the end of the day, I feel like it was very like the police were like trying to paint a narrative, like it's like Kenyans shouldn't care about what has happened here today because, oh, this is just how this family settles the squabbles. Like, you guys in your family scream, these guys murder each other. Anyway, next I would like to discuss the element of mental health, like the discussion of mental health that came up after this, issue. Now, Lawrence Warunge was really known to be a very calm individual. He never really bothered anybody. He was always like, he was a very nice guy. So the fact that this could have taken place and he would have done something like this took a lot of people by shock. Many people were like, he's such a polite guy. He's always been such a nice guy. I don't understand how he could do something like this. And it really sparked a conversation of mental health in Kenya. Now, I don't even know how to say it. When I say it sparked conversation of mental health in Kenya, it's not the way you would expect us to discuss mental health in Kenya. Let me just play a clip Let me just play a clip.
This. We try to evaluate the behavior we see. Are those signs true? For instance, if it's a laughter, is it involving the muscles of the cheek around here? If it is not involving these muscles, then it could be, a laughter, but a joy, a sign of...
Like, how do you guys laugh? Me, I laugh. When I laugh, my cheeks go up. And if the laugh doesn't involve the cheek, even those that fake laugh, they involve the cheeks. Let me see. Unless I laugh like that's the only way. If I laugh like this, it will involve the cheek. If I laugh like this, it will involve the cheek. Is this the advice? Is this how people are supposed to avoid mental health issues? This is how someone is supposed to check up on you. They should be like, whether they laughed and their cheeks didn't go up. What? That's never gonna happen. I want to tell you guys right now, that's never gonna happen. Anyway, I just feel like the conversation regarding mental health that was sparked was it didn't affect anything. So this kind of advice towards people to look out for mental health issues, I don't even see the correlation, because there's never a day when that's going to be the proof that we all needed that somebody wasn't okay. Anyway, the last thing I'd like to ask you guys is, do you think Lawrence Warunge actually did it by himself? I personally, I can't really speak to that. I don't know if he did it by himself. My job is not to speculate. My job is to tell you what happened and leave the rest to you all. I will finish my makeup. I'll finish it here, but I'll just do like a quick fast forward so I don't bore anybody. Yeah. Anyway guys, thank you so much for tuning into today's video. My hands are really dirty, like don't mind that. I'm going to go and wash them. I obviously hope today's case gave you guys something to think about. And yeah, that's actually all I have to say. Comment down below if you have anything to add on the case, if you have any other information. If you want to see more of me during the week, please make sure to follow me on my Instagram and my TikTok.